Hey guys, and welcome to Pathways. Today I have with me Judson Yant, and Judson Yant he's a ghostwriter. And I met Judson. I actually don't know exactly where and when, but it was actually on X, obviously. And I came across his content, which was so powerful, and it really resonated with me. And then I talked to him, and he talked to me, and then we went on a call, and it felt good. And so here it is today. So I welcome you, Judson, to our podcast episode today.
I appreciate you for having me, Gabriel. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, absolutely. So Judson, in your pinned tweet on X, you're telling your audience something about your personal story, how you hit rock bottom, and how you actually knew at some point or at some level that you were able to also get out of that rock bottom. Can you tell me about that backstory, the personal story that you write about there?
Yeah, for sure. Did I freeze? Okay, no, we're good. Yeah, so I moved to Europe when I was 18 years old, and I got into a big party phase in life for years. I got into a bunch of drug addictions, a bunch of alcoholism, a bunch of things, just a degenerate lifestyle overall. And I was in that for many years. And last year, around this time, I was dating this girl for about a year and my ex, and she ended up breaking up with me in February of last year. And I was in Prague and I became homeless in Prague. And I didn't know what to do. I was sleeping on benches. I was texting people throughout the nights after I would finish my job at the club. I'd text people, and a lot of the times people would already be asleep, and I would be just finishing my job at the club, usually on drugs, usually drunk, and I would just have to find like a bench or something or somewhere to sleep for a few hours until someone would text me and tell me that I could come and stay on their couch. And then when I would actually go and stay on somebody's couch, I would sleep the whole day and wake up and I would go back to the club and start working again. And that was like 7 days a week, pretty much. That was my normal routine. And it lasted for about 3 months from February until the early May. I'm coming up on the 1 year anniversary where I called my dad and can you please buy me a plane ticket back to the US? I was like, I think I'm gonna die here and soon, and I really want to leave and turn my life around. Because I always felt like I had a bit of potential inside of me. Or a lot of potential inside of me. I just knew that I went down kind of not a wrong path because I don't like living with regrets, but I went down a path that was not leading me anywhere and leading me into a lot of issues, obviously. So I ended up flying back to the States on May 8th, I believe, of last year, and just changed my life around. I bought a laptop, or I saved up the money to buy a laptop once I got back to the States. And I was like, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to figure out how to start an online business and to make money for myself. Because basically, I had the mentality of like, if I feel like I have this potential and I can take my life and hit such a rock bottom to the point where I was almost probably dead, then I can turn it back around and I can become a multimillionaire one day from my own self too. Because like if it's kind of like the yin and yang, I guess you could say. Like if I have this bad inside of me, then I have all this good inside of me just as much. So, and with my mindset, I'm not really one to um follow like the normal procedures that everybody else follows. So I really didn't want to get like a 9 to 5 when I came back to the States or fall into a new trap or fall into new addictions. So when I came back to the States, I also started 24-hour fasting. So I was like, um, I'm going to quit all the drugs, quit all the alcohol. I'm going to not make sure that I don't get a food addiction. I'm drinking coffee now, but I used to not drink coffee for a long time after I moved back to the States last year just to completely flush my system of everything and learn how to start business online. So that's what I did. That's kind of more of the backstory to that.
Yeah. What was it like? First of all, that's thank you for sharing that story. It's really, really powerful. It's not very often you talk to people that have hit rock bottom in that way and brought themselves up in the way you're describing it. What's your biggest lesson from those years? What's your biggest lesson from doing drugs, alcohol, and all that?
My biggest lesson from all of those years, I would say, it has a lot to do with values, I would say. I was always a deep thinker. I was always somebody who thought through life in a lot of ways, but I had no values to actually stand on. And therefore, I was on kind of a search for happiness and a search for an emotion, I would say. And that's what ended up getting me so addicted to drugs and stuff, is because when you're not used to those emotions and then you feel such a high, you get addicted to that high that you feel because I had no values to stand on. I had nothing that I was actually living for. I didn't actually take time to ask myself questions and come up with my own mission plan and my own purpose for my life. And back then, I was talking to somebody recently about this. Back then, I didn't really feel like I could ever go back to being sober. And now that I'm sober and I'm clean from all of that lifestyle, and I've actually sat and taken a long time to go deeper within myself and learn about myself and learn about my values and what I stand for. Now I can't ever imagine ever drinking or going back on drugs and that kind of thing again, because now I see that the potential is there and I have a higher self that I'm supposed to be living up to every day. I always look at it like there's a me in a alternate universe somewhere that's living the exact life that I could be living, and it's up to me to make sure that this reality is the best one that I could possibly be living. And that comes to knowing my values, knowing what I stand for, knowing what I want in life, and making sure that every decision that I make on a day-to-day basis and on a moment-to-moment basis is directed towards that mission and towards that goal of reaching highest potential and becoming my higher self. I'd say
Yeah.
that's the biggest takeaway. Making the right decisions, but knowing why you're making them.
Did you have any issues with like drugs or alcohol earlier in your life before you moved to nothing?
No,
It was just the environment.
yeah, I never even tasted my first sip of alcohol before. I grew up in a really Christian religious family. Didn't have a sip of alcohol, never smoked a cigarette, never smoked weed, never did any of that. It wasn't until I first moved to Europe that I first like indulged into all of that lifestyle.
Yeah. Did you run away from something when you were there? Like, was the whole, did you feel like the drugs or the alcohol? Sorry to going there, like going there because I want to really go deep.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Was it something that you were running away from? Was it like a numbing? You're talking about values. You didn't know what values you were standing on. You were disoriented in one sense, and so you were just chasing a high, basically,
hmm
right?
I would say it's not, I would say that it's like maybe a 70-30 from running away from something to actually just running towards something. It's not that I was necessarily like I grew up in a good home and everything. Um, I did have some like a lot of my I always say that a lot of my like childhood trauma was probably more self-inflicted than it was anybody actually giving me trauma or something like that. When I moved to Europe when I was 18 because I really wanted to get away. I really wanted to not have anybody like not have anyone to almost answer to. I was kind of just done with that. I was done with the for a while I was done with like the religion. I was done with this the Christianity. I was done with like being told what to do. I was done with all of those kind of things. And then I'm a very adventurous person too, and I love exploring. And it's always been my whole nature and my personality is I want to
Yeah.
see the world. I want to experience things because I think experience, even bad experiences, are the best teacher. So I would say I would say it was more trying to run towards a happiness. Because I always say I was chasing happiness. I moved to Europe to restart and reinvent myself to become who I thought I wanted to be at that point. I was chasing a feeling that I felt like I never got my life up until that point, and then the drugs and the alcohol and all of that came into play, and the friends that I was meeting, the popularity there, and it all just felt so good for so long that it just kept continuing and continuing and
Yeah.
continuing.
What was it about the Christianity that like I told you before we started talking, like I have a PhD in religious studies and theology,
Mhm.
So this is of personal interest to me also. And I've talked to many people that actually have are running away from something because, if they've been brought up in a environment that's could be controlling or with an image of God that's, authoritarian. And so, and in an environment where there's no actual space to explore who you are. There's no
Mhm.
space for individuation. There's no space to become who you are. There's no space to explore your own values. There's no space or encouragement to commit things that are not okay. Because, in some environments, God is always there watching, and, even your thoughts, it's very invasive. And so there's a lot of guilt and there's a lot of shame involved, especially when the entire concept of sin can be extremely controlling, extremely shaming, extremely uh, suppressing in one sense, especially for children who are not mature enough to understand those concepts.
Mhm.
Concepts as they are very often portrayed in scriptures, in religious settings, and so on. Because it's quite advanced to talk about sin. Like it's not. It's. You do a dis. I think personally, I think you do a disfavor to talk about those things in relation to children because they're not mature enough to understand. So you have to kind of break it down in completely different ways, as you said, values and so on. So what was it for you that like this is I need to get away from this and I need to get to this, right?
Yeah. So I would say back then, because a lot of my mindset has changed over the years and stuff, because I've done a lot of psychedelics and stuff like that. So a lot of my
Yeah,
takes have changed since back then. I would say back then, what I wanted to run away from, I feel like was almost the control. Like you said that you brought up individuality and stuff like that. I really wanted to have an opportunity to figure myself out. And there was something that was always felt like it was like pulling me away. And in a spirituality sense, that could have obviously been like a Satan or something that was like pulling me away from all of that. But however you want to look at it, I always felt like I was being pulled away, like I needed to go and experience more. Like there was more outside of what, because I feel like in religion, a lot of the times, so much of it is passed down from generation to generation to generation. It's like, okay, I grow up this way, I believe this way because my parents believe this way, and my brother and my sister believe this way, and then my grandparents and then their parents before them, they all believed this way. And I was like, there, but why do other people have such a strong belief or such a lack of belief to these things? Like, what did they experience that was not was what did they experience that was so different that makes them have their beliefs or lack of beliefs? And is that more real than what I'm supposed to believe in or what I'm told to believe in? And then you look at it from I've always been a very observant person. I've always been a deep thinker. I watch people, like I see through people, and you just see like, and you see this everywhere. And the older that I get, the more you realize that there's hypocrites everywhere. But then back then, I was just at a young state where I was seeing just all uh the hypocrites and the church, the people that I knew, the friends that I was around growing up in school, all of that kind of thing, where it was like you're supposed to believe one thing, but everybody's so pulled to be judgmental, everybody's so pulled to like great, like I'm holier than thou kind of mentality. And I was like, I want to get away from all of that and just kind of reinvent myself and figure out what I believe. Back then too, I was into like a bunch of different types of conspiracy theories and stuff like that as well. So I went down a lot of rabbit holes with like simulations, simulations. You hear about like all these different, and then especially when I started diving into psychedelics, you have so many different things that come up in your mind, and then it gets to the point where it's not that nothing makes sense, but everything makes sense. So you don't know what you actually believe in, and you don't actually know what could be real because you grow like or at least me personally, I feel like I've gotten such a deep understanding for different topics and for different people, and I can understand why someone believes something or has a different opinion than I do, and I understand how that makes sense to them. So then that kind of leaves you in a position sometimes where if everybody else makes sense and I understand them, then what is real? What is true? Because I understand my beliefs, I understand my opinions, I understand my parents' opinions, but then I also understand the opinions of all these people who believe and don't believe all these other things. And then you go down another rabbit hole of just questions that you'll never
Yeah,
have an actual solid answer to. And that was the hardest part for me for the longest time, and it's still something I struggle with is there's always more questions to be asked and there will never be answers for them, I guess, until we die and we all figure it out. So only the dead are the ones who have the answers to the questions you don't have answers to on this earth.
yeah. So two things I'm noticing, and I'll ask questions also about that. The first thing was the environment that you talked about that you grew up in, where holier than thou kind of mentality. Obviously, in my opinion, in my experience, that kind of mentality it's a controlling mentality, because obviously if everybody thinks that, you have to uphold this, you have to uphold this, you have to uphold this, no matter what, no matter what, no matter what, that does not leave any space for individuality or individuation where you actually become yourself. And at the same time, as you said, everybody's doing something on the side as well, right? It becomes like uh, almost like you have two personalities, I guess, where you go to church on Sundays and, in the eyes of the congregation, perhaps the parish you belong to, the community you belong to, you're well thought and you're perceived as this person, but that person is just a perception. It's not the real you, because you're afraid to show who you are, even for yourself sometimes, to acknowledge who you are. And so you live a different life, to some extent. And for some people, that's okay. They live like that for a long time, but they never actually connect to themselves authentically. They never dare to explore who they are. They never dare to be vulnerable enough, long enough, and the environment might not be letting them to do so. And so what I hear you saying is that that was too much for you. So what did you discover in about yourself when you went to
Oh
Europe?
man.
Yeah, when you
Um
did leave that setting.
yeah. So I realized for sure that I enjoyed not having anybody to answer to. Um I enjoyed not having necessarily authority, being able to make my own decisions, being able to be an individual and find myself and be open enough to try things in order to try to find myself even more. Um, because that has also been a thing, and I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to leave in the first place was the fact that I always wanted to make decisions for myself. I always wanted to figure out my life for myself, and I'm still this way to this day. Like obviously when I came back last year, like I said, I was just like, "Oh, I'm not going to go work a 9 to 5 and listen to somebody and like work for them and have them tell me
Yeah,
what to do. Um I just want to figure it out all on my own." And what I learned from myself was definitely that I liked having the ability to make decisions and then make mistakes and then also make good decisions and have good things come from those decisions. Because ultimately, I don't want to live a life of regret. I don't believe that you can be grateful for life and then also have a regret from the past. So even moving back, I've been asked, do you regret leaving and wasting all this time that you could have spent still like in religion and in Christianity and stuff? And I'm like, no, because I just can't like fathom or grasp regretting decisions that I made. Like people have all these connotations, and rightfully so a lot of the times, like, oh, you were addicted to drugs for years, you were an alcoholic for years, every day was drinking and drugs. Yeah, but also throughout all of those mistakes and throughout maybe the years that I did waste, I have so much life experience and so much stuff that I've thought through more thoroughly than a lot of people have probably thought through, especially as a 23-year-old, just because of all of those decisions that I made. So poor or wise decisions, there were still decisions that I stand on because I have to stand on them because they're part of my life.
yeah. Did you like yourself during those times? Or do you like and did you run away from that? Okay, shit, I can't deal with this. Uh, I can't stand myself.
No, I didn't until the very end. Whenever I got kicked out of the house and I became homeless, that's when I started having a lot of like self-reflection of like, damn, how did I get myself here? Like, how did this all happen?
Yeah,
And but up until that, no, I've always had and it may not have been necessarily a self-love, obviously. I guess it's kind of hard to, it's a whole deeper conversation to talk about. Do you really love yourself if you're a drug addict? If you're, can you, because you can't really like sit with yourself alone. But during that time, it wasn't like I was doing drugs. I may have been doing drugs because I was running from something, but I liked myself on drugs. I liked myself in that whole lifestyle and in that environment. Uh, I just knew that I was meant for more and that there's more to
yeah,
life and stuff outside of that. It took me a little while to realize it, but once you realize that, you become okay with yourself and you become okay with your past decisions as well.
yeah,
But I enjoyed the entire time. There was no Again, there was no regrets about it. I learned a lot about myself too, especially through the psychedelics. When I first came on Twitter, actually, I was thinking about, instead of becoming a ghostwriter, I was thinking about actually starting my own course on emotion regulation, because I realized throughout that phase, I started I started realizing I was on a chase of happiness, and then that led me to a lot of questions, and a lot of the times it was when I was on drugs and stuff like that too, or just on psychedelics, I would sit with myself. And the way that I got into writing in the first place, like 4 years ago or so, 4 or 5 years ago, was I was just journaling my thoughts. I was journaling like everything, every move that I made, every decision I made. I would start like kind of analyzing myself and like trying to figure out what was it about happiness that I was chasing and looking for. Why did I not feel like I already had it? And then that led me into a lot of deep reflection and deep analyzation. And then I started to, I always say like I would go to clubs and stuff, and when I would meet people, I would low key be trying to perform like psychoanalyzations on people that I met randomly at the club, like seeing what made people upset, seeing where they were at emotionally, trying to figure out what triggers people had, trying to figure out what my own triggers were. So I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed it, and I think that every bit of that was definitely needed, especially to make me who I am today.
yeah.
So.
Tell me something more about your psychedelic experience because you said you did it so many times that you can understand what other people believe and why they believe it and what experiences they may have had in order for them to believe it. And then I have my own experience and my own beliefs and my own values, and the difficulty is actually knowing uh, what to stand on, what's true, what's not true.
Mhm.
Can you say something more about that?
Yeah. I've done a lot of psychedelics. I haven't actually met anybody who's really done more psychedelics than me. Um, Honestly, a lot. And just throughout that time, I don't know if you've ever had any experiences with psychedelics, but your mind just starts to open. You start having like visions, you start having like the visuals and everything, and you start living like literally like you start living other lives, you start living more of your life like further into the future, or maybe not, maybe it won't actually be your future, but it feels like it. And it really opens your mind to life, and it opens your mind up to people. And throughout that time, because obviously I had my experience where you grow up in a Christian home, you grow up in church, you grow up in all these places, and you're told to think one way. The psychedelics come in and they kind of teach you to think always, like everything just kind of gets opened up. So you start talking to people, you do more psychedelics, you meet more people who have all these different backgrounds and different experiences, and it really created a yearning in my heart to like understand people, because I feel like so many people are misunderstood, and so much of that is the fact that people are so set in their ways, and they're so set in their own opinions and beliefs. Especially in the United States, you see like the division between politics, religions, just normal stuff, like day-to-day stuff. Everybody is always looking for what they can have a problem with you for. Whereas instead of like seeing what all your problems were that led you to become the person that you are today and what you stand on and what you believe now or who you are as a person. Whereas all that experience kind of brought me to a place where I just wanted to understand people. I wanted to understand what they believed in. I wanted to understand and like kind of put puzzle pieces together to like, oh, if this person grew up this way, then he kind of leans into these beliefs. If this person does this, he does this, and you kind of start to see patterns. And I think that's one of the things that I love is finding patterns, like fitting people's puzzle pieces together, making people the ability like I get told a lot that I'm a good listener and people like to talk to me and have conversations with me because I can actually it feels like I'm actually hearing what they have to say and I'm not
Yeah.
just listening to them to like think of the next thing that I'm going to say. And if that is the case, then it's something that's actually more beneficial because I actually am hearing them and not just
Yeah.
kind of spewing out advice and spewing out all of these beliefs onto somebody else because ultimately I always look at it in my mind like when I meet somebody and they believe something different and they will stand on it, they will stand on that hill. I kind of like see my mind in a way where it's like a database, and I just have spent so many years taking in what people have to say, and it leads to an understanding because I've seen it so many times because I actually like ponder on other people's thoughts and under other people's beliefs and opinions about things that you meet people and you're like whereas one person would be like, "Oh, I can't believe she or he is like that." And I'm just like, "Ah, that's nothing I haven't seen before. I've talked to people like that. They think that way because of this or whatnot." And yeah, it's just kind of a whole rabbit hole in and of itself because it leads you to a lot of speculation when everything just kind of makes sense to a degree because
Yeah.
of the lack of sense that it actually makes. But I think that's
And
why,
yeah, so with that experience, how do you actually find what values yourself? Because you talked about you found your values and you reflected on what values you have and so on. And I'm assuming that one of the values is that you don't want somebody to tell you, you want autonomy, right?
yeah.
In one sense. And so how do you know what to stand on if you can understand everyone? Because you said that initially that's something still you're struggling with.
Yeah, so I would say that when I say I found my values, a lot of that is me looking inwards and finding who I want to be as a person when I wake up every morning and open my eyes. What do I take seriously? How do I want to live my day? Um, I still struggle in a lot of ways in terms of like religion and in terms of what I believe the meaning of life is, because that is where I feel like so many things actually make a lot of sense, and there's not. It goes back to just you can always ask one more why, and someone can't give you a legitimate answer because there's not an answer for it. And if there is an answer for it, it's still just kind of like in the air and it leaves more questions to be asked. So but like my personal values are more inwards and like character traits and stuff that I want to wake up and have. So like a big one lately has been intentionality and proactiveness. So I wake up and I want to like be quick with things that I do. I want to be proactive in business. I want to make good decisions. I want to make good decisions and make them for myself. I want to have intentions with everything that I do on a moment to moment basis so that I'm not leaving a minute to fate. I'm not leaving a minute to just be something that wasn't used for something on my mission.
Yeah. And so what I'm curious about is your values are you choose and they change. And
Hmm.
what I thought of was among the great mystics of the different religious traditions. It can be Muslim, Sufi mystic tradition, can be Christian tradition. It can be Buddhist traditions also, I think. They all would agree to some extent that the answer lies in the question or in the longing. So it's not like the mystery of reality. It's always beyond. Like you
Hmm.
said, there's always another question to ask.
Yeah.
We cannot comprehend reality
Yeah.
as it is fully. We can only have certain perspectives of reality. We can
Yep.
only have a big, small slice of what reality is, right? We can only have a piece of pizza, but we don't even know how big the pizza is. That's the discrepancy between our understanding and reality. And I think that when it comes to traditions that they're monotheists, right? So Christian, Muslim, Jewish. But I think this is also, again, would go for also more Asian religious traditions as well.
Mm-hmm.
They would describe that reality is God, right?
Yeah.
And then they have different ideas about what God is. And God is everything, and we cannot understand God, we cannot comprehend God. And in some traditions, in Christian traditions, they would even go so far to say that any description of God is false. We can only use negative words to describe God, namely, always say what we don't know, not what we know. And even if we say something about what we know, it's never going to be a description of that reality. It's our perspective of that reality. And the reality in and of itself is beyond anything that we can even describe or comprehend.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's so true, because I feel like that it's very big. I read something not too long ago. I don't remember who I read it from or who wrote it, but he was talking about how because humans want to label everything so badly, like the ego wants to label things so badly, like you have all these people with all these different perspectives and interpretations of what God is, but you can't you can't describe God more than just being God. Like you can't like you have all of these connotations towards when you hear the word or see the word God of what God is, but that's just an interpretation that is either yours that you came up with or one that you've seen or one that you got taught. I think that a lot of it has to do with faith as well. I think that faith is everything. I had on a psychedelic trip one time, I had a thought about maybe the whole meaning in life is to actually find faith, to find that one thing that you can believe in and have comfort in. And whether you're a Muslim and that be Islam, or Buddha and it be like, I don't know, inner peace or whatever exactly it is, Christianity and it be their Jesus and their description of God. Maybe everybody's purpose is to have that one thing that they stand so firmly on just to give them some grounding,
Yeah.
because life is so chaotic. But that's something that, and I think that one of the reasons why I've struggled so much in terms of uh, the religion side of it is because I've had so many, you see the state of the world too today with like elites and all of the weird ritualistic things that go on in the music industry and with the celebrities and things like that. And even on some of my psychedelic trips and some ketamine trips, I've had like some very dark and demonic feelings about some of those experiences. And that's one of the things that always brings me back to, because I could never be an atheist. I'm, if anything, I'm agnostic because I do believe that there has to be some God, there has to be some higher power and something like that, because I've just seen too much evil in the world for there not to be something good just as strong. So it's like if there's demons, there's got to be angels, and if there's Satan, then there's got to be a God. Uh, that's kind of one of the other aspects of it that I've seen is like it's not even just. I feel like I've seen the evil in the world, and but then it's like everybody agrees on the fact that there's like a Satan and demons, and then when it comes to the God over here, now there's like 12 different things you could believe in. So it's like, oh yeah, one Satan, but there's 12 different gods that different people believe in. But one Satan though, it's like evil versus 12 goods. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well if I'm running this way, then like now I've got a fork in the road, 12 forks in the road, and I'm like, which one is supposed to be right? Because I've seen this. So like now there's just options.
Well, I think two things. I think, first of all, thank you for sharing that. And second, I think there are not only 12 different gods. I think there are as many gods as people believe or not believe,
Yeah,
don't
that's kind
believe
of
in.
what I meant.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with, I think, evil. Whatever evil, whatever you call evil, the same thing there. As many like people might have an image of Satan, others would have talk about like social structures, that are like suppressive, that suppress people, that creates ruins the world, the nature, and all that. So it's destructive, right? Social structures that are destructive. We have those structures within ourselves as well, but we also have the goodness within ourselves as well, of course.
Yep.
But Christians would say, we very, very fast to say also, I think this goes for all religious traditions as well. They would say that the nature of reality is good in and of itself, that nothing bad actually exists, but it's actually a distortion of the good. This has been a debate among Christian writers from very early on. For example, we don't need to go into this, but I'm just giving a short example. And this is, Augustine of Hippo. He was a bishop in the 5th century, a Catholic bishop, and he'd say that the evil is the lack of the good that should have been there, but it's not there. Yeah. So do you have the entire idea about angels and demons and so on? Yeah, that's how it's viewed in scriptures, right? You have descriptions of demons and so on. But I think most scholars today that work with scriptures, they might say, I'm not an expert on scriptures, but what I've understood them to say is that those are the best words, the best description to be used to describe social realities. And in a dualistic world where, Plato believed, for example, and he was very impactful in the Western societies, that the world is essentially spiritual world. So material is, there are two realities, the material world and the spiritual world.
Yeah.
So there has to be like then these demons and these angels that are doing all their stuff. But in today's, I think, understanding of scriptures and description of this kind of stuff, like angels and demons, people will talk about these are social structures. These are description of realities and how societies are built. And there are good structures, there are bad structures within ourselves and so on.
Yeah. Are you saying that it's one or the other? Like there's not like are you saying that it's not a spiritual world versus a reality, but that is a facade and it's all reality? Is that what you were
Yeah,
saying?
I think it's there's one reality. Yeah, I'm not dualistic. Yeah, that's like you can have a dualistic viewpoint, namely just saying that there's a separation between the material world and the spiritual world. But in the traditions that I've studied, they would say that matter is expressed through, spirituality is expressed in the body. So there's no separation between the spiritual and the physical world, reality at all. They're one and the same.
So with that being said, do you believe in so you don't believe in there being angels and demons, you just believe in it being social structures, like there's no such thing as a demon or an angel?
Me personally, I mean, I'm not talking about me personally. I would say how scholars are viewing it, and I think most scholars would say that no, there's not a spiritual being that we could call angels or demons. Spiritual demons, like angels and demons, were used in the ancient world to describe how evil and good work in the world. And today we would use like sociological theories to help us understand these structures that are in society. These are made up of human beings, and certainly there are some human beings that are, they do bad stuff, right? It can be for a variety of reasons, and that's a mystery in itself. Now you could say,
Yeah.
okay, it's like yesterday in Sweden, there were two kids, 10 years old, in a town here, local in Stockholm. They were killed, a girl and a boy, and they were found in their home and with mom and dad. And they were both taken into custody. Mom was released today, and it's believed that, probably was the dad. I think he admitted even that he had done it because he's suffering from some serious mental illness. So you could say it's only mental illness. I have difficulty seeing that it's only mental illness. I think it's that together with other stuff as well. But exactly what I don't even want to speculate to that question. Yeah, but certainly mental illness, susceptibility, childhood formation. There's a lot of stuff going on there, I think.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
R.I.P. to them.
yeah, certainly, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, talking about a lot of cool stuff, I want to get into ghostwriting business, into your content creation.
Okay.
Tell me, a person who is coming into X or into the social media world, what's the best thing they could do if they want, their intention there is to grow an online business?
hmm
What are you supposed to do?
Yeah. If I was
How
going
do
to
you
tell,
write good copy?
how do I write his copy?
How do you write good copy
How do you write
that
good
helps you grow?
copy?
That
I
helps
would
you
say that
grow.
the first thing to do would get your formatting down, which is simple. You don't have to go too extreme with the formatting. I would say that the next best thing to do is write a lot, get into a writing habit, and practice your finding your voice. And a trick that I have for that is that I used to find my voice early on was taking a voice recording of me talking through an idea and then just writing out the idea on a piece of paper so I can hear myself how I would say it. Because I think a lot of people sound like robots. They sound like they're all just ChatGPT mimics, but they're humans. And you're supposed to lean into the human side of yourself in the way that you would speak in a conversational tone. I would definitely say that. I would say if you're trying to grow on X, don't lose yourself in engaging in on big accounts for too long. A lot of people fall into the vanity metrics of seeing their impression count very high, and it's not about the impressions necessarily. Like, worry about your relationships, worry about engagement strategies that actually work, have some intentionality behind what you're doing. And to grow a business, I would figure out what it is that you're trying to sell, if it's coaching, if it's a service, if it's a product, and reverse engineer it until from where you want to be from to where you are now, get an offer down, figure out your ICP, who you want to write for, who you want to work for or work with, and from there just move forward with it and meet people, build relationships, make people want to work with you. This is something that I didn't do for a long time. I was writing a lot of like personal stories, personal things, philosophies and ideas and stuff that I was having. And if you're trying to start a business on X, I would say that figure out a content strategy so that you can actually get inbound leads. So write about what you're supposed to be an authority in, talk about it so that you'll actually have people sending you DMs asking you like, hey, it sounds like you know your shit. Let me get some information from you or whatnot. And I would say that those are probably the main pillars and stuff that I would work on. Figure out your offer, have a solid engagement strategy, and then have a content strategy that works around both of those.
Yeah. And in my experience, I've talked to a lot of people also on this podcast and outside of the podcast. All of that you're talking about is essentially about building a brand. So you have different stages in your business creation and growth. In the beginning, you have to hustle perhaps a lot,
Yep.
and finding your own voice, as you said, and actually a good idea to speak your thoughts, right? Because then you actually hear them. You don't just
Mhm.
read them. Even if
Yep.
you write them, read them to yourself so that you actually hear what you're saying and record
Yep.
them and then listen to them. It's actually a good thing. I'll take that up. I haven't done that myself. I think I have done it to some extent, but not extensively.
hmm
But my point being is, in the beginning, it's a lot of creating the relationships. So it's engaging with people, mostly in the DMs, I would say, more than perhaps just commenting on people or so. But then in the end, or not in the end, but once you have a more mature authority or mature brand, then it's a different story, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
what's your take on that? Yeah. It's not about
I
marketing, it's about branding, right? In the end.
Yeah, I always tell people up until you get to your first like 300 to 500 followers and you're very early on if you're just starting out on X, you need to focus more on building relationships, sending DMs and your engagement. And then when you get to the point where you're at 300 to 500 followers, you're at a point where if you have your branding right and your profile looks nice and you know what you're offering, at that point you're big enough to where people will actually trust you that you could know what you're talking about, unless it's about like growth, for instance, because you would probably need a little more growth to be able to sell
Yeah.
growth at 300 followers. But just from a generalistic standpoint, I think that you start out, and a lot of it is relationships and building relationships and creating the relationships, and then engagement. And then as you start to increase and see an increase in your followers and just your brand in general, your own engagement, then you need to start focusing more, bring the balance down to where you work on the content and make sure that you're putting out high quality stuff. You're actually pushing your offer. You're actually showing your authority. I would say that around 300 to 500 followers is probably a good point to start doing that.
Yeah,
Also, this is something that I'm about to start here in the next week. I should have done this a long time ago, but I recommend for anybody who listens to this, start a newsletter too. A newsletter
yeah,
is so key. Like, I wish I would have started that at the very beginning, but I never did. I didn't see the importance back then.
yeah. And start a podcast because you get to talk to a lot of cool people.
Yeah, start a podcast.
For sure, if you're comfortable doing that. So you're a ghostwriter. What do you do?
So I ghostwrite for usually CEOs, founders, and agency owners. More agency owners right now. I'm still getting into the CEOs, the CEO and executive side of things. But yeah, basically what I do is I'll either just ghostwrite people's content for them, or I'll become kind of like their ex social media manager. So I'll kind of do engagement for some clients along with writing their content for them, implementing the strategies that I have in order for them to see growth in their account and also get leads and build their own personal brands and their own businesses, help them make money and grow,
Yeah,
get their brand and name out there.
yeah, that's awesome. And if people want to work with you, where would you be able to find you?
Yeah, you can DM me on X, Judson Yant. I'm on LinkedIn as well as Judson Yant.
Okay,
Those are probably the two best places to find me.
I'll put that in the show notes too, so that people can find you when they listen to this episode.
Awesome.
Justin, was there anything else that I should have asked that I didn't ask?
That you should have asked, but you didn't ask.
Yeah, that
Uh,
you feel like you want to talk about?
no, I think that you covered everything. It was a pretty interesting conversation
Yeah.
too. Steered into religion. It was pretty fun to talk.
I did not expect to go into demons and angels. I can tell you that much when we start off this conversation.
I know, right?
I was like, shit, where are we going here?
Yeah, it was good though. Like,
Yeah,
I think that it's always interesting to talk about these things. I feel
yeah,
like it sparks people's intrigue and stuff whenever you
yeah.
kind of get into these conversations. So that's a
Yeah, I
good
mean,
idea.
I think also in like in the popular culture, like these are big things right now.
Yeah,
Like just look at the movies,
yeah,
shows. It's angels and demons are everywhere, vampires, everything that's like occult kind of thing, right?
yeah,
It's out there for sure.
yeah. For the record, though, I would say that I definitely do believe in a spiritual world, just because of experiences that I've had that were more supernatural than they were social constructs.
Yeah,
Honestly,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's when you from your experience on being on psychedelics.
Yeah, psychedelics, um, a couple other things as well. I got into a period of time where I was having sleep paralysis quite a bit, and I'd wake up and there would be like I'd see like spirits and figures and stuff like that in my room and on the bed with me and stuff like that, and just
Yeah,
weird stuff that you can't really like explain. It sounds weird to someone who hasn't really experienced it or is not
yeah.
open-minded.
There are two approaches in the from the antiquity, and
Hmm.
one became predominant. Plato was, he was a dualist, a big dualist. So he believed like the spiritual world is more real than the material world. He actually saw the material world as lesser and a deterioration of the spiritual world that had a
Hmm.
huge impact on Western society, on the Christian, on church, because it makes sense, soul, body, everything,
Yep.
God, material world, and so on. Aristotle, he had kind of a different view. He also believed in the spiritual, but for him, for example, when he talks about the soul, he doesn't talk about the soul as something separate from the body. He says that the soul is the form, the causal form of the body, of the person. What's the causal form in his categories? So it's, for example, to say the causal form of an acorn is to become a tree.
Mm-hmm.
So acorn exists, but its end goal is to become a tree. So the soul is not separate from the person or from the body. It's actually what you're becoming.
Mm-hmm.
That's who you're becoming. So they're never separated from each other. And there's always, how can I put it? There's always a tension between the two. And you'll find it all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think these
I
antique people, they had a lot of experience with psychedelics as well.
yeah. I 100% agree with that aspect, that there's always
Yeah.
like a mind and body, or spirit and body, however you want to call it, like tension and
Yeah.
stuff that's just ever building. So
Yeah.
your ego is never aligned.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it easy for you? This is the last question when asked, I forgot. Was it easy for you to get clean when you came back to the States?
It was actually easier than I thought it would be. I think because I was already came to a place where I was wanting to quit and I was wanting to get off of all of that stuff. So I think it came at a point where, yeah, I did deal with a little bit of withdrawals when I moved back to the States. I was having some pretty bad withdrawals for about like a week or so, but then it went away pretty quickly. And then I'm coming up about, today's like the 25th. I'm coming up on, I think, under 2 weeks till I'm a year clean and a year sober. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Congratulations on that. I'm happy for you.
I appreciate that,
Absolutely.
man. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Judson. Thank you. I appreciate you very much, and this conversation was awesome. So
Yeah,
thank
I
you so
appreciate
much.
you for having me. Thank you.